13 years ago, Fantasy Flight Games brought the world and characters of A Song of Ice and Fire to life in A Game of Thrones the card game. Since that time, George R.R. Martin has added new volumes, characters and intrigues to his beloved fantasy saga. Now, Fantasy Flight Games is releasing a second edition of A Game of Thrones the card game that offers players a deep and immersive experience with the characters, battles and intrigues of Westeros.
So here at FFG, we've been working on A Game of Thrones the card game for 10 plus years, and this whole time we've been supporting it with more and more cards. We have a really strong community going, but the card pool is so vast at this point that it was one of the many reasons why we thought a second edition would be a really great idea. It'll draw in new players. The game is really starting to show its age. It'll let us kind of tighten up some of the mechanics and really draw in new players and make the community even stronger.
We have this game that it's been around for about 12, 13 years, and each year we've had to do different things to correct for past errors or to fix things that weren't working in the new format, and it picked up a lot of baggage over time. The history of the game became an obstacle for players to get into it, so we decided that the best thing to do was to relaunch it, try to streamline and clean up a lot of the baggage, and we came up with the second edition, which also has a lot of new content as well.
I'd have to say that my favorite part of working on Game of Thrones second edition is is just the fact that I am a huge Game of Thrones fan. Mostly I just love the substance, and I love the chance to be able to offer up my interpretation of the content in the books and really just put my touch on something so fantastic and so great.
Basically, every single time you play a game, you are crafting a deck that is your house of choice and playing against somebody else who's picking their house of choice. So every time you have a game, you're basically having a small story about how these two houses interacted, who dies, who lives. It's really exciting, and every single time you do that, you could play the same faction 10 times, and that story is going to come out different every time.
Second edition, one of the first things we did was we tried to identify what were the core elements of the game that make Game of Thrones card game, and we didn't want to change the kind of the heart of the game. So the few things we identified, one was the plot deck, which each round of players, they have a hand of 7 plots that they will reveal one each round, which kind of gives them their long-term strategy for that round. That's the same. The second one is the challenge phase. This is how you interact and attack your opponent. There's 3 basic challenges: military, which is battle; intrigue, which is kind of scheming and spying at court; and then the power challenge, which is political influence and trying to kind of capture the will of the people. There are other important things to Westeros. One is that characters must die. It's Martin's World main character death is a big part of what made him who he is. So it was important that there are unique characters in the game, and they're important because it's a character-driven setting, but there's also a very real possibility that they could die and they go to your dead pile and then they can't come back into the game.
Game of Thrones First Edition was a wonderful game, and over the years we got to add a lot of great new content, and with that great new content came new graphic design needs that weren't initially concepted when the game was made. At the very beginning we started with character cards, and I lined them up for all the different factions. That gave me a good idea of what colors and which direction I was going, and then from there I built one character card for one faction. Then I began to work on character cards for the other factions based off of that template. Then I moved on to creating the rest of the cards for that initial faction that I built, so that, the locations, event cards, etc.
There's a couple ways to enjoy the game. There's the traditional joust format, which is one player against another player, and it is exactly what you think. It's like a battle between two houses, and it's a lot of fun. The other version is you can play the melee format, and in melee format you're playing against multiple players. It's a multiplayer experience. It also has a lot more back and forth. There's a lot more allying. It can kind of be backstabbing in ways. It's a lot of fun.
I think my favorite thing to be working with is having the two new factions. It's a broader template. You can do a lot more with both the Night's Watch and Tyrells when they're their own faction. And Night's Watch, we used to treat them as neutral. Tyrells were kind of a mixture of Lannister supporters and Baratheon supporters. So now that they're their own thing, we can. It's just design-wise, there's a lot more we can do. I think I'm also just excited about the chance to expose the game to a whole new generation of players. Like the game has a lot of diehard fans who've been playing it since the beginning, and it's always been able, when people give it a chance, they love it, and I think this is a great opportunity for a much broader audience to discover the game.
I mean, there's really no better time right now for new players to get involved in this game than right now. I mean, this new core set is going to be the best entry point for new players.
Now that it's all done, I just have to say I'm so excited. I wish that I could be at Gen Con to see when this is going to be released and the look on everybody's faces when they open up this box, because I am very, very proud of where it ended up, and I think that the changes that we've made from first edition to second edition is just proof of the capacity that this game has to grow and change and just get better and better and better. And I really think that we've accomplished a lot, both from everything that Nate and the other producers have worked on, along with the graphic design, and I think that we've come up with an awesome product that people are going to love. I'm going to be playing it faithfully, and I hope everybody else feels the same way.